Technological advancements have become an integral dimension for modern-day diplomacy. However, these tech diplomacy do have a particular cost that must be realized. As lives are bound to change in the post-pandemic scenario, India's reliability on Japan for its technological resources look obvious. With the question of debt trap looming, how would India figure out the balance between technological advancements and diplomacy? Joining us today on this segment, we have Mr. Shashank S. Patel. He is a PhD scholar from the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi. In addition to that, he writes in for the Kutniti as a research analyst for East Asian affairs. How did the technological advancement play a role in the New World Order, especially in the developing regions like South Asia?
Rijita, in that new world order and the technological role, two things are very distinct, I think 20 years ago. But now the new world order itself reflects a new arrangements in the new century. And it is a continuous process. And these arrangements are actually powered by inventions and discoveries, which are interdependent and integrated to exercise influence via confluence. Earlier, there are three dominating sections that control the advancements. The first is research and development (R&D). Second is innovation, and third is high technology trade. In past, first world countries are leading these all three aspects, and on the basis of the Western interests, developing regions like South Asia are dictated. Earlier, it was Africa, but China has created a renewed world order with inclusion of artificial intelligence and data collection. As we know, tech advancements holds greater value in terms of money, power, status, and accomplishment. And every advanced player will make rules by their game. South Asia holds three strategic keys where everyone is interested. The first is the production capacity, second is consumer market, and third is trade junctions. So all the three are regulated, controlled, and operated through the technology, and which promotes the internationalism of production and markets, because it makes it possible to achieve new levels of the economies of scale and scope through flexible systems. Hence, I would say that technological advancements will not play, role in the South Asia till 2025, and technological efficacy will be the sole parameter to alter the new world order.
All right. So moving on to the next question. What key junctures did you find in the Indo-Japan bilateral relations and diplomacy after the 2+2 strategic dialogue?
After 2+2, so Indo-Japan bilateral relations are on the crest, you know that, right now in the post 2018. So I will answer this question into the pointers. So the key junctures on as per me, is the first one is the climate control and mitigation efforts. Second is securing the communication lanes. Third is defense manufacturing. Fourth is cooperation for achieving the MDG goals, the Millennium Development Goals, proposed by the UN. And next will be the pumping up the supply chain resilience initiative, the very famous SCRI initiative between the India and Japan. The other one will be the RRTS, as per I think, the Regional Rapid Transit System advancements, and this is a win-win mega project for the both of the countries. And the last I would put the to grow the Asian regionalism. That is the more important one, which can be seen from the wholesome narrative. Because these nations have the cumulative advantage of being the confederate of the USA in the region, and which enables them to actually achieve their commons on the sidelines with support from the main resource lines, whether it will be the, and all these ways, the main source lines, the resource lines are one of first world countries, as you know it.
So, can you elaborate on the role of the regional rapid transit system in the development of the Indian communication lanes?
Yeah, actually, you picked the very important thing out of it. That is the RRTS. And this RRTS is not only the urgent need of India. In fact, it is the grave requirement to facilitate the population of tier one and the tier two cities in India. And I will go into very depth when I told you about it, because I have studied a much a lot in that. And developing countries like the India must have to stick with their so-called carbon emission boundaries which were carved by at the international level. So high-speed railway systems. There is a very common survey. I wrote it earlier in the Kutniti that high-speed railway systems emits around 8.32 times less carbon than the car travel, and 11.4 I think times less than the aviation travel. And India's carbon footprint grew with the sustained with the industry's intensive economy being made. So to shrink it in the future, high speed rails are our trains are viable and sustained version to ensure the climate mitigation efforts of India and reduce the carbon emission in the transportation sector. And the Indian transportation also needs a prudent, frequent, accurate, and sustainable means of transport in both passenger and the freight rolling stocks, both the things. And the corridors which are developing with the RRTS are the combination in India right now. It is the combination of the rail, road, trade, commercial hubs, e-hubs, and the tactical storage points. So it will integrate the demand supply chain as well as the minimize the consumer producer trench. And the another fact is also that the average and it's a very not a good thing to say, but the average speed of the Indian train transit in India is around 22 to 25 kilometer per hour, which is too poor, especially in this category. Okay, so and India is targeting to achieve the minimum 40 kilometer per hour, which is possible only with the Japanese assistance by upgrading the signaling, rail efficiency, uh, digital infra establishments, because Japan is mastered itself in the railway management tactics from the long ago. Around it is around 2 to 3 decades where the Japan now is the expert in these systems. So RRTS is in that sense, RRTS is also required for us for the decongestion of the Indian road infrastructure, as the burden is rising day by day. You know that, and due to the mass migration of the labor towards the cities. So Japanese digital know-how to upgrade the existing railway infrastructure will increase the efficiency, especially in the energy storage systems, ESS systems, and the regenerative braking techniques, which are the very important for the to mitigate to accidents. And it is highly beneficial in the accident-prone regions also, because India have a very different geography everywhere. From the every 100 kilometer, the geography changes. So that's how. And the last thing which I have to actually told you, uh, the cycle efficiency is one of the very important factor where the Japan has mastered in Shinkansen especially. Okay, so RRTS in that it is a round trip efficiency index, the cycle efficiency, where all the parameters were considered for to and fro travel. And Indian Railways stood at a low efficiency level in the world, which is under 60%. Because and the amazing thing is that India has the biggest railway infrastructure in the world. Okay, but still in the efficiency we are at the lower index at the around 60%, under 60%. And Japanese railways are at the very high efficiency, as you very really understood, and they are more than 90%. They are stood around 92 to 94% right now. So by upgrading the existing features in traveling, we can grow hand in hand with the multiple benefits with Japan.
Okay. In the 21st century, technological advancements are the foundation of economic activities, which led to open new avenues of diplomacy and further strengthening bilateral relations.
Hmm.
Do you see Indo-Japan relations growing under this shadow too?
Yes, yes, brother. I would say the core reason of escalation of Indo-Japan bilateral relation rests on the technological advancements. If you compare the energy propounded in strengthening the bilateral relations in late 20th century, and the post-digitalized economy, you will observe it's a gap of understanding potential of one another. I would not say gap, it is a gaff. Literally, it's a GAFFE. So, India and Japan bilateral relations are growing heavily on the onus of the technological import and cooperation from 2015 onwards. And Japan is extending its ODA heavily in the South Asian region, focusing on India. So, the creation of infrastructure through the economic relationship is the newer concept under the as we discussed about the new under the new world order, but it is not a it is not a well established sustained model of growth yet till yet. Okay, but I would highlight the important thing here, that the technological cooperation is a bliss until it haphazard the diplomacy. Okay, so I would repeat this line again and again everywhere whenever I read anything about the technological cooperation of the India with any of the country, that literally the technological cooperation is a bliss until it haphazard the diplomacy. And due the reason is also there. The tech as advancements are considered as a symbol of achievement after the strategic and the global partnership between India and Japan. And diplomatic channels grew with the Japanese insertion in the Indian markets heavily. So this defense sector, and also the defense sector summed it up from the last 2 years, as you know, that after the 2+2, and it's a very in a very sensitive manner. The 2+2 strategic dialogue was a resultant of this economic diplomatic channel, which was established after 2014 annual summit. So it is very astonishing to actually hear that defense ministers meeting, NSA level dialogue, ministerial level 2+2, FOC consultations, and the other bilateral dialogue mechanisms developed in the post-economic relevance phase. So that's how you can understand the how the Indo-Japan relations are grew under this shadow.
All right. So speaking of technological advancements and how you said that it is a bliss up until it kind of haphazards the diplomacy. So should India rely on in the post-pandemic world? Should it be China, South Korea, or Japan?
That's a tricky one. in in East Asia, we literally cannot rely on anyone for any particulars. We have to understand that we are not efficient enough to fulfill the need of 1.3 billion plus populace, and our resources are very limited and aspirations are too huge. These three nations are equally required in the dedicated aspects for India in the post-pandemic period. So we can't fix the terms and conditions of the post-pandemic period in mid of it, as the end may vary heftily. Okay, so but one thing we can assure, that China, South Korea, and Japan is that India is relying on its social coherence and institutional framework to cope up with this pandemic. Post-pandemic phase will be tough for all the production intensive countries like South Korea, whether it will be China or India. As a new socio-economic transformation will arise post-pandemic, and it is a very obvious that the trade figures will show declining path. So in that particular case, I would say China and Japan will be the two countries where India will rest its head for a while. That's it.
All right. So moving on to the last question, I want to ask you that there are new arrangements which will surely benefit India in long term, or India will feel jaws of debt diplomacy, like other Southeast and South Asian nations going through the same debt diplomacy under China.
See, this question is coming in minds of several scholars from the last 3-4 years, as the trade deficit between India and Japan is rising year by year. Also, the FDI flow in open sectors are increasing double fold from 2018 onwards. So assets developed via economic assistance under the ODA is a double-edged sword assets. They are of multiple uses, but for the both the parties involved. But we must create a clear line between the loan, between grants, and the investment in technical cooperation from Japan. See, there is a thing about the people were actually discussing about Quad everywhere, but with the inclusion of the France, Germany, and Brits in the Indo-Pacific affairs, the terms between India and Japan will take turn. towards the very competitive towards the competitive advantage in the region, and it will evidently turn the things little fishy as healthy it was. So we have to ensure the transparency in diplomatic channels first, to curb any possibility of misinterpretation of the facts by both the sides, not only in the India, on the both the sides. And obviously the intents are good as of now, but the unilateral conclusion of the narrative will result in disorder in the future. So long term loans are safe till now, uh, as the interest rates are very low comparative to the market rates. But the delay and contestations on the technical assistance and imports raises eyebrows of Indian academia and industrial entities heavily. So something is not as swift as it has to be. And again, I'm saying the same thing, which may annoy the other one. The technological cooperation is a bliss until it hazard the diplomacy. So one has to clear its path. One has to make ensure that there will be no fishy things between the behind the curtains.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today on this segment. And I hope that our viewers will be enjoying this and gaining some insightful conclusions out of it. And thank you so much again. So hope
Thank
to
you.
see more such interactions with you in the future.
Thank you.